We got a typo on Wednesday. My eye is drawn to it.
All right.
Damn.
Well, we're live, Mac. We cut out the 15-minute intro there, so we're going live. We just noticed that someone that's in control of doing the scroll there failed
So I
on
can't
Wednesday.
help it. It's a curse. I can't help it. How's everybody doing out there?
Hopefully, everyone's doing really well. So, joining us for episode 14. So, Mac, how about we just kind of start with the hot topic of the year, I guess, right? So, I guess we got some good signs on, lumber pricing and pricing in general, just kind of, reaching more of an equilibrium price.
Yeah,
so
we're actually shorthanded today. We've got actually Randy and Perry are out looking for lumber right now. So,
yeah, right.
Doing some double duty out there right now.
Yeah, we got one on vacation and one with no AC. So
It's non-lumber related.
Non-lumber related.
But
So
that is the burning question: is what is lumber doing today?
yeah, so just looking, over the last couple of weeks, right? So we came off this extremely high peak, which I think had us all scratching our heads going, oh my gosh, hopefully it doesn't go to $3,000 a board feet, right?
Seriously.
As you have to reevaluating what a real asset is and, just cutting up little pieces of 2x4 and investing in them because they're more than gold at that point.
I know.
Lumber yards start looking like Fort Knox at prices like that. So
I got a splinter in my finger, and I think it's worth about $45 right now. So.
Right, for sure. But, I think a breath of fresh air as we've seen things come down. And as we were tracking it over the last couple of weeks, I was a little more hopeful that it would take a little bit deeper dive. And then I seen yesterday kind of as it started that slope down, that one tick up. Right. And so as you start seeing that, right, you're testing a bottom. And it was the first sign that I saw that it tests a bottom right at 900. It's, closed today a little bit less than $900 a board foot. So what I see when you look at kind of the forecast going is what I would expect is it's trying to find the bottom and it's going to go up for there. So the days of, $350, $400 a board foot, those are gone, which we've tried to tell people that those days are behind us, right? And preparing for the future at this new price. And, you're basically dealing with inflation at this point.
Yeah, no matter what, we're going to end up with a new normal.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not going back to where it was before. And, the question that's being posed to me every day is, hey, I'm watching lumber prices. They're coming down. So when do I get a price break?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I've explained this in the supply chain. So, people use the commodity as a gauge for where things are going, but as coming all the way through the supply chain and how that affects you at the current price that you buy. So typically you buy from a wholesaler. Most people aren't buying from Lowe's or Home Depot, but if you're on the other side of this camera, there's a pretty good chance that you are buying from Lowe's or Home Depot. That's a different, that's a retail price, not necessarily a wholesale price. You're buying one board and you go back and get a credit for one board, right? Yeah. So there's a premium for that. So, we're not, although I guess send an 18-wheeler out to pick up, calling it a credit for a $15 2x4 at this point. Hey, I've got 3 of these left. I need a credit for them. Send the 18-wheeler out there with a spider lift on the back.
That's it. Yeah, we got a hot load coming in.
Right, hot load coming in, right? So as that tracks through the lumber market, right, and goes into the lumber yard, and they buy on a cash index, a little bit different than the commodity index, right? But then what I'm seeing out there is they have pretty strong inventories themselves out there that they're locked in at a price that they purchased, trying to hedge a bet basically on crazy prices. So getting that inventory out and then replacing it with new inventory. And one of the biggest factors, Mick, that we're seeing is what's driving the price down is a lot of builders went out there and just put slabs on the ground and said, I'm not paying that price for lumber,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
So that just drove the demand way down, but it's an artificial, it's artificially going down.
Mm-hmm.
There's still pent up demand going there. And so the minute it breaks this threshold that is, someone says, okay, I think I can deal with that now, right? And so you begin to deal with that price point. Now you're going to flood the market at a particular time of the year where historically the price of lumber is going down. So you get in the fall to winter months, the Northeast usually checks out, right? They're just like, hey, we're not doing as many in the snow and stuff, right? And so that usually lets a lot of pressure up in the pressure off the market. But now you have this pent up demand going into that slower period. It's not going to fall off like we traditionally see.
Right.
And, God forbid we have a few named storms like they're projecting this year, right? It's going to keep the prices up. So I think we're just dealing with the new normal, and everyone's, adjusting to the price levels. But the mistake that what gets the news out there is lumber. That's the biggest thing that makes the news because it was historical highs. One that I saw, one of my most recent price increases was paint coming through the supply chain, right?
Yep.
And it's just like literally absolutely everything, right? And then we were talking to the AC guy a couple of days ago. It's like coils. Well, you can get the system, but you can't get the coil, right? So you can't complete the system. So there's another trip charge essentially because what they used to complete in one trip, now they're going to have to make 2 trips because they just can't buy the whole thing, right? And so then there's a labor increase because of the actually dealing with it. So the supply shortage increases the labor side of it. Everyone's having to deal with things a little bit more, handle things more and more trips, stuff like that. And we're seeing that across the board on everything. And the labor side of it is starting to creep up. And then you kind of have hot and cold markets. You have things, as you have a bunch of frames stopping, now it's like, oh, okay, you can find a framer. Right? Well, in a couple of months, when all these things hit the ground again, you won't be able to find a framer.
It's going to be back in the same
problem. So we're basically on this yo-yo string right now of things out of whack. And so before this, we kind of just were discussing laying it out. Why don't we outlay the downward pressures, right? If we were to sit here and make a list, what are the downward pressures in the market? There aren't any, right? There's no reason that we can come up with that is going to take pressure off of this market.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that could be perceived as downward pressure is the fact that we're in the 3rd month of declining sales on a national level. Now, where we live, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, demand's still up 300%, 400%, 500%.
Right.
It's just because people are relocating to this particular area. But as like you said, builders are holding back. But at some point in the very near future, that could change very quickly.
I think buyers in those markets have also. So the problem is, I explain to people like this: if you had a box with holes in it, right? And each of those holes had a peg in it, and that represented resale inventory out there, right? New construction represents that one additional box that you take the peg out of and put it in, and it allows the other ones to all move around. When you bottleneck new construction, the resale market gets clogged up, right? And so as prices are increasing over there, and you can't move out of that old house into the new house that you wanted to. So now all that bottleneck, so prices rise, but then someone decides to sit on the sidelines over there. They're not selling their house, right?
We're seeing a lot more of that right now.
Right. You start seeing that built up, right? So what I try to tell people is like, that's not a perfect market, right? So when you're trying to judge markets, there's really no such thing as a perfect market. But if you look at the pressures on the market, that's not just the natural flow of where it is, right? You still have this effect of the thing that shall be named nameless on YouTube that we can't say.
The thing we can't talk about.
The thing that we can't talk about for some reason, or we get demonetized. So
can't have that happen.
We can't have that happen, right? So without that, that's where you see people just saying, okay, I'm just going to sit here and ride this thing out because they want to move, right? Well, when the ability to get material and get that job, that start on the ground, and you get a new job or a new opportunity or something over the course of the year, and you do want to physically move, that demand, it's pin up, right? They're showing, okay, it's still sitting out there. It's like it's just not real, right? You got to be careful of the statistics, right? Statistics can be manipulated out there if you're not judging it on the outlying pressures out there. And I think people go, oh, look, that's a great statistic. I'm like, oh, it's not the whole picture.
You can make statistics say anything you want as long as you torture them long enough. So.
You torture it long enough and throw out the information you don't want, right? So, you gotta kind of look at the statistics and say, well, what's driving that? And if you're trying to invest in real estate, people investing in real estate, even if you're buying home, you're still somewhat investing in real estate. You're investing in your the wealth of your future. But if you're literally trying to invest in, like, paying attention to that window of opportunity, there is no. I'm looking at 2-3 years out, and I can't see the downward pressure. And the reason I say that is because we've been on this rodeo before. Everyone refers to 2008. They don't understand 2006 is when it started. It took 2 years to hit a bottom. That was the slide down that it took 2 years. So the slide down took 2 years. Well, the slide up took 5 or 6 years, right? We rode that slide up, and it peaked and then went down, and now it's just referred to as 2008 because that's when the banks and all that stuff blew up. Well, heck, it took a long time to get all those bad mortgages wrapped up into something.
And also that's where it hit the media. The media got a hold of that.
Right.
And then it was a hot topic for quite a while. But before that, those of us in the industry, we felt it. We saw what was
felt it in 2006. Yeah. We rode it all the way down, and you woke up every day knowing that you're in a bad market, and the next market, the next week, the next month, there was nothing. There was no sign in the whole year of 2006, the whole year of 2007. We never showed up and said, hey, guess what? Next month, all the signs are that this is over with, right? That was 2 years of that. Yeah. We're in the exact same thing right now, right? So when we wake up, we're going, okay, there's nothing 2 years away from this that's showing it the other way. So now, if you were to say 2 years out, throw a dart on the board and say between 2 and 3 years out, I think that's anyone's guess at that point. It could turn at that point, and it could go back the other way. But in 2 years, if you're asking yourself, my price next year is going to be a lot more than it is today.
The $64 million question is, what is that new price going to be? And nobody really knows. But one thing I can pretty much guarantee, I think you'd agree, is that it's never going to be back to where it was even 6 months ago.
Well, here's an easy way that I help people calculate that, right? So if you just looked at the consumer price index and measured for inflation, and you just wanted to take a random guess, right? Let's just throw a random guess out there. So historically, we've tried to keep, as a nation, 2% in inflation. Okay, and we've done a pretty good job. Sometimes 1.8, 2.2. Look over the last, I think it's probably about 10 years now of going at rates like that. Well, it came out a couple of months ago, and it's 4.25 now, right? So your dollar is buying, let's take the fractions because Perry's not here. He's doing you get me doing math in my head. Let's just say 4% so I could do the math easy, right? So your $100 only buys $96 this year, right?
Yeah.
And so, that $100,000 house right now, you're only going to have $96,000 worth of buying power in a year, right?
Right.
But the way that is tracked, they're tracking it a year back, right? If you look where we were a year ago now, that's when we're just starting all this stuff that is trying to deal with the problem, right? So we're experiencing all that in the last 4 months, right? So reality is that we're higher than that. So let's just say 5%, 6% is what we're dealing with, okay? So as you go through the year, buying something today, you have more buying power today than you do a year from now, just because of the inflation that we're dealing with.
Right.
Okay. So if you're looking to buy something, the answer is the sooner you can do it over the next 2 years, because prices are going to be going up.
Right.
It's always the right decision. Now, 2 years from now, are you trying to, now this is where new construction and resales are going to break, right? So when it peaks, you're going to have some fluctuation on the resale market because you have a buyer and a seller, and let's just say that there's less buyers in the market, right? And you'll be able to actually find a house and negotiate a price and stuff like that. New construction doesn't work on the same cost basis of
That's true.
homes, right? And so there's at that peak, there's going to be a break. There's some markets, kind of like our market, there's more like a cost basis, and then there's some markets that are more demand basis, or like California. It takes a long time to put something on the ground over there, right? And so you have just different factors in new construction that are driving the ultimate price in there. And so on that peak, that's where you see that wobbling effect of, you know, who can give up the price as there's less buyers in the market right there. It's definitely not going to be new breaking first. It's going to be on the resale side, because you're going to have some urgency.
Thing that's so different right now is the fact that the inventory, the resale inventory, even secondary housing, vacation homes on the coast and the hill country have all been bought up. That's one thing. There's some factors at play here that are very different than what we've seen in the past. So again, the wild card is, I think, is when is this demand going to start backing off, and what are the interest rates going to do?
A couple of weeks ago, me and you had this kind of like thought experiment, and the more I thought about it after we talked, Mac, I think you're right. If you project this out, so we know over the next 6 months, historically what we've seen and what we're talking about, that the pressure's not coming off the market, right? You're not going to automatically introduce 1 million new homes into the market and everyone can find a house and everyone's got a seat at the table, right? So that's not going to happen. Over the course of the next year, yes, you're going to bring inventory to the table, but is it going to match demand? Probably not, right?
We don't know.
We don't know, right? So the answer is you probably can't catch up that quick, okay, because of the pent-up demand. We just spent a year not buying houses, right? So no one can judge what that pent-up demand is. Doesn't matter how much of an expert you are. There's no crystal ball to understand what that is, especially as the workforce changes. That's a driving factor.
That is a big deal, Justin.
Yeah.
Because people now can live, work just about anywhere they want,
right?
As long as they have an internet signal.
Exactly. And we think about it, you get stronger internet. You know, employers basically said, okay, it's okay to work from home. I've even noticed it in restaurants. So we're in Texas. We've been open a little longer than a lot of other places in the country. So I think we're a little ahead of seeing some of the trends versus like a California or East Coast stuff, that because we were one of the first to open. But one of the trends that I started noticing is I thought as soon as we opened that those order lines and to-go stuff would really fade and that the restaurants would really go back to traditional business, but we haven't seen it. Like, I thought it was going to be like, okay, hey, we're open, screw the way we were doing business and this stuff, go back. Now it really is this hybrid approach.
And I think that, you know, just looking around at all the restaurants that I stop into,
and I guess some of that's, you know, and they're not able to get the employees back at the same pace too.
That's a big part of it. But I mean, every restaurant that I have seen has been busy.
Right, really busy.
Really busy.
But if you look at that to-go order line, it's still busy.
It's still busy.
Right,
So it's like,
that's right.
Everybody just quit cooking. I mean,
It was like, what the hell?
No.
So there's, if you look at, so what I was trying to extrapolate out of that is like, so the job market is changed and no one knows what the answer to the job market is, right? As these companies start bringing employees back, what effect does that have to someone actually making the decision to move? Because it crosses all price points, right? You need someone to leave this price point so that they can vacate a house so that person can move up. We're a move up market.
Right.
Is the way, you know, it just starts from the bottom and it goes on up, right? You need someone to buy your house so you can buy the next one.
Yeah.
right? And it starts at the bottom and it works all the way up, right? So when you are looking as an investor out there, you're looking into the world and you're going, wait, don't pay attention to just your market that you're in. That's not where that happens. You need someone to leave this market to come into your market, and someone's going to leave your market and go out of that market. So you're looking at the influx and the outflux, right, of that market right there. And you're trying to judge how many people are in that market, right? And right now that's a very difficult thing because the typical flow of in and out, there's too many things to account for. Like, is this place hiring? Are they not hiring? Are they changing the way they do business?
One of the current dynamics going on right now is the fact that affordable housing is an all-time low right now.
Yeah.
And that's, again, what's driving a lot of the investors to build, rental properties.
Yeah. That's
lease properties.
That's what, I've been talking with, our group a lot about, is that you basically just took an affordable house, tacked $50,000 to $60,000 on it, okay,
No longer affordable.
and said, "There's the starter home. It's not so affordable anymore."
You've
right?
knocked a big segment out of the
Right.
market.
Well, people's salary didn't take that same jump at the same time frame.
Exactly.
So the math on that is affordability left, right? And so now you have a bunch of pent up renters. So the decision to buy, wanting to buy, and being able to buy, those are two different things.
Yep.
And the transaction takes a long time, right? So it takes a long time to figure out that you can't buy, right? You hunt for a home, you apply for a loan, you get denied. You get the bad news,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that process takes a long. It's not like going to Best Buy and looking in your wallet and go, "I'm $10 short." It's not the way housing works, right? It's just a long transactional process, and then you figure out you can't buy, and that's literally what happened the last time when the bank said, "Okay, we're tightening up." They don't run ads going, "Hey guys, we quit giving you loans." No, they turn people down, right? Yeah. But they don't announce that they're turning people down. They just start turning people down, and it takes a long time for the market to absorb and go, "Oh, we're turning people down now." So now you are.
And it takes a while for a first-time buyer to actually.
Right.
There's a learning curve.
There's a learning curve, right? And then first-time buyer, you got programs and you got things that are really, really dynamic right there, and all your stuff's usually not together. Hopefully I forgot to turn the air compressor off.
I was wondering what that noise was. I thought it was.
Hopefully it's not coming through the mics, but if you hear a weird sound on the other side of that,
we have work going on in the background.
Exactly.
We got to pay the bills somehow, right?
Exactly. But just figuring out that transaction, right, and getting the answer, that's got to take a long time to get through the market. And affordability, like you mentioned, is what's left. And then finding that out, and then they turn into renters at that point, and now you have a glut of renters on the backside of that, right? So all this pent-up demand that you thought for buyers on this side is a pent-up demand for rentals on this side. And if people aren't moving, like that job thing, right, then it stacks up on that side, and then the rent prices go through the roof. And you've seen that in markets like, New York and things like that. You see that usually in microcosms of areas, right?
Yeah.
Not the whole nation. We've never experienced it on an entire nation.
Yeah.
Right there. This is what unprecedented times that we're looking at. So it's really, you got to pay attention to the whole spectrum of all aspects of it, and not just thinking about, okay, well, I serve this market or I serve this market. You got to pay attention to the whole market. What is that entry level home all the way up to the multi-million-dollar home? Because everyone's shooting for that multi-million-dollar home. Yeah. There's just a lot of steps in between.
But
right?
everyone's taken a couple of steps back in terms of what their buying power was even 6 months ago. So people have reevaluated where they want to be, what they want to spend, and we've seen everybody kind of take a step back a little bit.
Yeah, I think even as you get more buyers into the market, so we're not seeing the cure coming from new constructions, right? Inventory of solving the housing shortage, right? So the only cure that I see over the long term is going to be taking buyers out, which is the interest rate, and moving the interest rate up. So there's already been indications that over the next year, they're going to start creeping it up. But me and you talked about this. It's that 2-year window, right? Not in the next year. I think 2022, we'll start to see it creep up, right? And what the government's trying to do is they're just trying to put their foot on the gas pedal and say, hey, I don't want to spook anyone. I don't want to cause any problems, right? They're going to be really, really hesitant to say, well, here's a 1%, interest rate hike, right? That would freak everyone out. Does the opposite. You're going to see a little bit of it go on next year. The problem is if we don't resolve this problem and affordability keeps leaving after that year. I mean, you talked about that's a housing crisis. A housing shortage is what we're in.
Right.
Housing crisis, right? That's out of control prices. The only way to fix that is pull buyers out.
Yeah.
And that's where the big interest rate hikes come up. That's where you start looking at the 70s and 80s, right?
We've seen that before.
And we've seen that before. And, looking back through that, I asked my mom about this and I was like, okay, so she was developing a neighborhood back then. It happened to be called Walton Estates at the time. But it was also one of the reasons that we moved from California to here, that when we looked at what was going on, as they started really, really ratcheting those interest rates up. So this is kind of like an interesting thing. Your effect that you want is to remove buyers out of the market, right? But at some point, when you're making so much interest in your savings account, there's just a certain segment of the population that's making more in their savings account than they were on Wall Street, right? Yeah. And so you create a buyer because he's got so much money in his savings account making money. He's like, well, gosh, I guess I'll just buy a house. Even though the interest rate's high, I've got really good flow coming in. And so you really have to crank that interest rate up to cure the market, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the scary thing that you see really far out in that 2-3 year window, that you want to say, okay, 3 years out from now, is that something that's theoretically possible? Yes. And it's why they're going to have their foot on the pedal. The answer to that is to get projects on the ground. Right? That's enough of a window that capital can come into a market, put a development on the ground, and increase supply, right? So there is a window for things to avoid that, but you got to be careful of like capital markets getting tied up and not doing those deals, and people the need to do those deals.
Yeah, and I think too that a lot of people have become very spoiled, and they don't. A lot of people weren't alive or weren't old enough to buy a home back in the 80s when interest rates were 18%. And we've been spoiled. I mean, we had these ridiculously low interest rates for years now.
And when I tell people when they're like, oh, we got to take advantage of the interest rates that are really, really low right now. So just go back a few years when they were 5%. Everyone said, I got to take advantage of these ridiculously low interest rates, right? Remember when they were like 6%, and they were like, man, these are really low interest rates, right? So even though they may go up in the future, you're not going to remove the amount of buyers that you think at 3.5%, 4.5%, 5.5%, 6.5%, because just like you said, the fear when it's 4.5% is that it's going to go to 5.5%.
Yeah, it's the fear of loss, and that's a heavy motivator.
And every time it does that, here's a new flux of buyers that come in, right? And then you move it to 5.5%.
Then there's a cooling off
period,
and then
right?
It surge again, then another cooling off.
And then the news article comes out, oh, they're going to raise interest rates
surge,
again. Another surge,
race
right?
for the door.
It's a race for the door, and it does that all the way up, right? And then at some point, you start scaring them off. Let's say 8, 9%. You start scaring people off. They're like not doing it. But then you gain that buyer that's like, wait a minute, I'm making really good money in my savings account now.
If my memory serves me correctly, that's when the mortgage industry kicks in and gets very creative. At that point.
That's like, okay, the seconds and just weird stuff happens, right?
You get very, very creative out there.
Yeah, when you take that many buyers out of the market responds with creativity. Right. To bring it back, bring back demand. Right. They're trying to. You got too many large companies trying to figure out how to make those numbers on Wall Street make sense next quarter, right? And you got to bring that back in. How do you deal with 9%? How do you deal with 10%? There's always going to be a business plan to deal with 9 or 10%.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So taking advantage of it right now is the best thing you could ever do. And looking back in 10 years, you'd be like, thank God I took advantage of it then.
If I'm just the average Joe and I'm sitting out there right now and I'm looking to sell my home, at a record profit. I'm going to sell it. I bought it for $250. I'm going to sell it for $350, let's say.
Right.
And I'm going to reinvest. I want to build a home in the 500 range. So should I wait right now? If I'm wanting to build a custom home, should I wait, or should I wait for 2 or 3, 4 months?
So this is okay. So let's go. I'm going to put two hats on right here. Okay. I'm going to put my, because I've done this myself, because I've built every house I've ever lived in myself. Right. And I have this way of looking at it. I got my investor hat and I got my home hat. Yep. Right. And let's just say you're making a personal decision right now. If you're going to say the only asset that I have is my home.
Right.
Okay. That's 99% of America right now.
True.
Right?
That's true.
99% of America, asset is your home. And you're wanting to take advantage of this market, right? Here's how you take advantage of this market. And let's say you're doing okay, right? Let's say you've got a $400,000 house, right? $450,000 house. That would be in our market, which is kind of pretty decent market, right? So let's say California, that's a $900,000 house, right? Right at $1 million. I mean, we're talking about 2,400 square feet, 2,800 square feet, somewhere in there, right? Okay. Good condition. You're not having to dump a bunch of money in it. Decent house, right? Somewhere in that market, you're making the decision. If you really want to take advantage of this market, you have to be willing to take a step down, which people aren't really willing to do. But you have to ask yourself, are you investing? Which hat do you have on? Okay. Because if you have that hat on and you want to capitalize on the market, because if you move from this house to the next house, you didn't capitalize on it, right? You just, yes, you sold it for a record price, but you're going to go buy high. You sold high and bought high.
It's a push.
It's a push, right? So the only way to capitalize it is to take that one step. But here's the step that you have to make. When you make that step to go buy down, you have to be able to, when you sell that house, you're not going to sell that house. You're going to rent that house, right? Now, okay, you've got that smaller house, you got some equity, you got, cash in the bank, and you're going to go invest that. And while things are hot right now, you're trying to take that cash, make a return on the cash, go sit in that rental right now. Well, it's not a rental to you, you own it, right?
Yeah.
And when you're ready to take advantage of that downturn, when it comes down to the other side right there, right? The downside is creating more renters.
Yeah.
Right? You took buyers out of the market and you created more renters.
Right.
So there's stronger demand on that side.
Yeah.
So what you want to do,
go up.
right? And now you can buy the house that you want at a lower price because there's less market right there. Okay. Yeah. And even if interest rates are higher, you can afford it because the price is lower.
Yeah.
Right? So you can make that transition from one to the next now. But here's the thing, you gained two assets now. You gained it. You gained an asset now.
Right.
You've increased your wealth by doing that, and you're renting that out for record rent.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so now, okay, you've got that thing, and you go over here and you're able to pick renters because rental market's so strong.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're able to take care of the property because you have a little bit extra rent to make sure the lawn's mowed and, do all the things that you would want as your other asset right there. Then as you ride that out, you're in the house that you want. Life's going to happen again, right?
Yep.
And then you can sell that asset in the next upturn. But you rent it, okay, increasing your wealth the entire time. So let's say you ride that 6-8 years out, right?
Right.
Because these dips take a long time in this market.
So you're wearing your investor hat, right?
Yeah, so that was the investor hat right there. So that's your investment strategy. You take that hat off and then you say, okay, now I'm going to do it at home. Okay, so when you put the home hat on and you want to sell that house in this market and go into the next house, it's not an investment, it's home, right?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to say, how much does home cost me?
Yeah. It's like buying a swimming pool.
Right.
You're not buying that.
It's a bad investment.
It's a bad investment.
It's a bad investment. But how much?
How much enjoyment?
How much enjoyment am I getting out of it? Right. How much is that other job am I moving for giving me?
Exactly.
Right. And so is that a negotiating tool that you say to the employer that's offering you the job, hey, I've got to sell my house. Okay, I'm selling at a record high, but I'm also buying at a record high. So when you offer me that job, I'm not taking it for the same amount of money. You're going to have to take that step up to pull that off, right? So all those things have to come into evaluating that decision to do it right there. And so that's the home hat, making the decision on how much that costs you and recognizing that it is costing you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where it goes from being more of a analytical, fact-based decision to the emotional decision. That's when you put that home buyer hat on.
Right.
That's where that comes in.
Right. And that's, traditionally in custom, markets and stuff, that's what you see, people making decisions based on home. Do I like this or I like that? That's a home-based decision. Those are not investment type decisions, but you always got to have that investment hat on at some point because you are going to sell that thing. Right. But, that's two strategies I think that right now that you could look at, invest in this market versus, trying to buy a home.
Good points. Very good points.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's, minus, two of our counterparts here right now. So, I think, episode 14, I think we'll kind of put it in the bag right there, Mac. We've kind of run our time. We don't want to wear everyone's attention out.
There you go. And we'll along with the rest of you, we'll be watching those lumber prices very, very carefully over the coming weeks.
All right. We'll see everyone next week then.
Everybody have a great week.